All right, welcome Jared, he's our head of engineering, to the stage.
Thanks, Tom. All right, hi everyone. Thanks a lot for sitting through this talk. I think I've met some of you already, and this talk is about powering builders. So what we're really discussing here are software development kits, or in this case, SDKs. So what I really want to talk to you about is how, if you're not already using them, they can improve your time to deliver on any kind of custom implementations that you have. Really, this is a case for when you must write code to integrate something. So we have a lot of things that are low code, no code, which I know you all appreciate and love. This is for that secondary and final case where you have to write code to make it integrate fully with your system. So really, when we're looking at this, we've seen a number of customer-built integrations with the Files.com platform where people really struggle with performance or with reliability. Often this comes down to a lack of guidance, largely from us, or in other situations, you might have legacy code that was written before you were able to deal with us as far as best practices. So at this point now, we have improved our developer documentation. So that's well documented for all the SDKs and the raw APIs too. When these integrations break though, they usually stem from that custom code, not the Files.com platform itself. So that's exactly why we built these SDKs. They abstract away a lot of the low-layer API implementation work, and they enforce the best practices we've seen when working with the platform, and that dramatically also reduces the development time and error rates that you might experience when working with us from a coded solution. In short, what we're really talking about is removing pain for you guys, right? We want it to always just work and be there for you, just like the rest of our platform. So if you're integrating with Files.com using code, you really should be using our SDKs. They're faster, cleaner, and they're built for that reason. So I'm going to talk through real quick some examples we've seen. So if you're a logistics company or a company that has to move files on a regular basis, which most of you do, this real-world case is like you have to ship shipping documents, bill of materials, invoices, whatever on a daily basis, right? So that has a time to deliver that's really critical for you. You really need to make sure that that time-sensitive data is transmitted and transmitted reliably. So if you're dealing with that custom code integration, it's really important that you use something like our SDK that has a lot of built-in features with it to make sure that works properly for you. So in that scenario, you might have something that you built. You can interact with the API directly, and it might work, but it doesn't have all the error handling in it. So before you would use an SDK like ours, you might have something that you built in PHP or C# or whatever, and it would work, but that can be kind of creative sometimes. Every file transfer might feel a little bit like a gamble, right? And failures may go unnoticed. The error reasons for a failure might go unnoticed too. Retry logic can be patchy in those situations if you don't know how to handle the errors, versus our SDKs that implement that all for you. So when a file doesn't land like it's supposed to in that case, someone might have to go back and manually transfer the file again, right? That's kind of a worst case scenario where you have to have user interaction to make that finally go through. And with a smaller dev team, that means you're maintaining a lot of that API integration too, right? Like you don't want to be responsible for all the constant changes that are going through or having to keep up to date with interacting with different parameters on the different calls, right? We want to make that as easy as possible for you. And in the different languages, we want to make sure that you have the type checking that you need there too. So like C#, where it's a statically typed language, you want to make sure that that's properly applied for all the parameters. And because of that standard error handling that's lacking without the SDK, you can have silent failures that you may miss, right? You may not understand why the failure is occurring. It takes a lot of splunking, which no one likes to do. Right. So if we look at these real-world examples a little bit more, you can have incoming folders with automated file pulling and retrieval. You might need to restrict how the file flow works for you in that case. Really working through that, you want to work on file validation and using the SDK to make sure that you handle the exceptions that might occur during a transfer or move. The result of that is a significant reduction in maintenance time when you use SDKs versus trying to figure it all out on your own. And really, you want to move towards that final implementation that you can put in and not worry about, right? That's why we support multiple languages in the SDK, and we make it so that it's seamless and easy for you to build with. Right. So after you switch to the SDK, you really get to replace those API calls. It'll be cleaner and it's maintained. It removes the pain points that you might experience with the raw API. And the file validation and inline handling, you can use things like regex then still, just like you would do in a normal implementation. And that really will benefit you there. When you cut out that maintenance workload of having to keep up with the API and the raw calls, you're saving yourself time too. So the end goal there is to get it so that you can reduce transfer failures and improve your resilience with API usage. And we want everyone to sleep better through it too. So let's look at real quick like some of the other uses of why you want to look at this. So I already mentioned that it abstracts away API complexity. It includes all of our best practices that we already have in here too. So our SDKs include the time investment that we use every day. Each SDK provides language-specific implementation, so you don't have to worry about rebuilding that for yourself every time. And we did this to prevent cognitive overload, in addition to making sure that we can use each language's unique features so that it's robust and performant for you as well. As a language-specific example in .NET, we support both asynchronous methods and JavaScript supports promises too. So we have witnessed multiple times in this case that a customer has used a system where they've integrated something like SFTP custom library in their language, and that ends up having different failure rates. So in SFTP, you can have a case where it responds with a generic error code of 4, which is not fun if you've ever experienced that. That means that it's just a generic failure that the server is telling you about. And the only way you can get more descriptive details to read the actual descriptive error message that comes back, if it exists. In a lot of cases, that would be blank. In the SDK implementation, you get a nice, clean error code back along with the error message, which really will help you if you ever do have that scenario occur. All right, and wouldn't it be a lot better to just join everyone else that's already using the SDKs in that case instead? So we can look at who uses the Files SDKs. Probably the biggest point I can make here first is Files.com uses our own SDKs every day, right? So what do I mean by that? We use our SDKs ourselves for our Boomi and MuleSoft iPaaS integrations, our CLI application, our desktop v6 application, the Terraform provider, and the Arclin backend that we've created as well. So that's a lot of use cases there in different languages that help to make sure that our SDKs are both performant and are error-free for you guys. So they're constantly tested, fully functional, and they have ongoing growth and improvements that are occurring through that use, that self-use from Files.com. And we also have a lot of customers that use them for automated workflows, the data validation, and integrating with other tools like third-party exchanges and CRMs. And then you might ask, well, am I supported on this, right? So from the language support level, we include Python, .NET, Java, PHP, JavaScript, Ruby, and Go, which is a pretty extensive list already. Each SDK is published to the language-specific repository that any of your developers can access. So that might be something like PyPy or NuGet or Maven for Java. And your team can easily discover, install, and add them as dependencies into their existing projects. There's no friction, there's no hunting to find the files and manually add them in. You just drop it in as a dependency in your project and you're ready to go. So with those, you have a clean, idiomatic way to implement the SDK into your platform in production. Your developers feel like they're working inside of their native language when they're using them, and they're not fighting against any direct raw API calls. Recent changes to SDKs you might not be aware of, though, are improvements to our Java SDK for dependency management. We've also updated our Python SDK so that it's PEP naming compliant, if you know what that means, including also a similar thing for PHP where we've included PSR compliance for naming, to name a few things. Right. And you can easily get started with them. Like I mentioned before, our developer documentation is pretty excellent. You can find code examples. You can find all the documentation on the different parameters and options that you need there and all the methods. Each SDK is published fully along with that documentation. So you can also check that out on our GitHub repository as well. And the language-specific guides and walkthroughs are on the developer documentation. So that'll normally get you up and running pretty quick. We talk about all the methods you need to know to start, configuration, authentication, and then the standard things that you would want to do with us, like list files, folder directories, and do uploads and downloads. And if you hit a snag, like the important part that you need to know too is our support is there to support you through that engagement. Our engineers are developers too, so we speak your language. So don't worry about that. Like we're always there working on the SDKs and getting constant improvements out. Right. And do we have any Q&A about the SDKs? I know earlier I was talking to a few of you and you are already using them at this point. Yeah. So it does depend by language. We have some basic tracking there. I believe for .NET we're at like 90 customers that use the .NET SDK. Here? Oh.
How many of you guys
One,
use
two.
our SDKs or APIs? Just a raise of hands.
Yeah. All right, we got 3. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, it's good for us to know how many of you guys are actually using it, but we have improved the SDKs and API documentation significantly. We took the approach of you first select the language that you care about and then letting you navigate to the specific references for that. Lots and lots of great samples that we've added to that stuff. I guess I'll make the quick analogy of, if you're going to bake a cake, right, would you rather just start with all of the raw ingredients to make a completely, 5-layer cake, or would you want the frosting to be provided to you? Would you want the baked cake layers, so all you have to do is assemble that together and create every single topping out of that on your own and figure out the mix of exactly what goes into that recipe? Or do you want to be more dealing with assembling the cake, right, in this particular case, and making it a nice presentation of 3D, looking cake? What would you rather focus on? That's the analogy between using APIs directly versus the SDKs, right? The SDK lets you assemble a great-looking cake without having to know how to make every single ingredient that goes into a good-looking cake or good-tasting cake. That. So, yeah, questions?
No? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.